In the shadowed corridors of European history, an order of warriors rode in black, brothers bound by secrecy, their legends whispered across the centuries. Tonight, we drift into the untold saga of the Black Knights of Europe, the Templar Order time forgot. Before we begin, take a deep breath, let the day fade. If you enjoy journeys through hidden history, tap, like, and subscribe so more stories like this can accompany your nights. Now, settle in as we follow the trail of a vanished brotherhood whose odes still echo in the quiet of old cathedrals and moonlit fields. The candlelight flickered across cold stone as the autumn wind curled through the ruined arches of the old commandery. Night pressed against the countryside like a velvet cloak, and only the occasional cry of a distant owl disturbed the hush. In the year 1314, Europe held its breath. The once mighty Knights Templar, champions of crusade, masters of finance, and symbols of unyielding discipline, were being hunted to extinction. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars had stood as a pillar of medieval Christendom. They had escorted pilgrims across dangerous roads, raised castles along the Levantine coast, and built a banking network that allowed merchants to move gold across continents without touching a single coin. Their white mantles, emblazoned with the Red Cross, were recognized from the ports of Portugal to the deserts of Syria. But now those same banners smoldered in bonfires of accusation. King Philip IV of France, deep in debt to the order, had moved first. Before the sun rose on Friday the 13th of October, his agents swept across the realm. Templar houses were raided, knights were dragged from their beds, chests of documents and coin were seized. The Pope, under Philip's heavy hand, soon followed with bulls of suppression. In Paris, Grand Master Jacques de Molay and his companions were chained and tortured. Under pressure, confessions were wrung from them, admissions of heresy, of worshipping a mysterious head, of spitting on the cross. Most of Europe knew these charges smelled of politics, but few dared speak. As weeks turned to months, whispers spread among those who had worn the white mantle. Some fled to the kingdoms of Scotland and Portugal, where kings sympathetic to the order offered quiet refuge. Others disguised themselves as masons and merchants. Yet there were stories, always spoken in low voices, always at the edge of a fire's light, of another path. According to these tales, a small company of brothers rode west from Paris on that fateful night, their warhorses cloaked in black and their shields stripped of heraldry. They carried not only coin and documents but secrets the king could never know, maps to hidden ports, keys to vaults beneath forgotten chapels, relics taken from the Holy Land and guarded since the First Crusade. Their leader, some said, was a knight named Everard de Bars, a veteran of Acre and a man of unwavering silence. Others claimed it was a woman, one of the rare Templar associates who had taken informal vows and now guided the remnant through dark forests and along moonlit rivers. The records of the time make no mention of such a flight. Chroniclers were careful and suspicious, and if a column of riders had thundered across Burgundy or the Ardennes, surely someone would have written it down. Yet the absence of evidence is itself a fertile soil for legend. In the decades that followed, peasants along old Roman roads spoke of strangers who passed at midnight, their armor blackened, their horses unshod to muffle sound. Monks in remote abbeys awoke to find food and coin left on their altars, as if in payment for silence. To imagine that journey is to walk beside them now, in the stillness of a medieval night. Picture the cold mist rising from the Loire, wrapping the riders in a silver haze. Their breath steams like the spirits of wolves. Hooves drum softly on damp earth. No one speaks. The creak of leather and the occasional snort of a horse are the only sounds. Above them, stars burn through a canopy of cloud, indifferent and eternal. Where were they going? Some legends place their destination in the rugged mountains of the Pyrenees, where Cathar ruins still whispered of heresy and hidden scripture. Others believe they sought the Atlantic coast, to slip aboard a ship bound for Scotland, where Robert the Bruce defied the Pope and might welcome hardened warriors. A few point to the Baltic, where crusading knights still waged war against the pagans of the north. Whatever the truth, the writers seem to vanish into the folds of history. Centuries later, ballads in rural France and Germany told of the Black Knights, not the chivalric foes of tournaments, but ghostly figures who appeared when injustice reigned. They were said to ride silently through battlefields after sunset, gathering the souls of the brave and carrying them to a secret hall of rest. Children whispered that if you left a candle burning in an empty chapel on the eve of St. John, you might hear the distant echo of hooves. Farmers claimed that in times of famine, mysterious benefactors left sacks of grain near village wells, sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a black cross. Historians, ever cautious, explain these stories as echoes of the Templar trauma. When a powerful order collapses, people cling to myths of survival. The idea that a hidden band of knights continued their sacred mission comforted those who had admired the Templars and feared the greed of kings. Yet there are tantalizing fragments that resist easy dismissal. A 14th century shipping manifest from La Rochelle listing 10 crates of unusual weight consigned to a vessel bound for the North Sea. An English court record describing strangers, clad in sable armor, assisting a band of rebels in Yorkshire. A German monastic chronicle noting the sudden arrival of foreign brethren, skilled in fortification and alchemy. Imagine again the scene inside a lonely abbey where such visitors might have paused. The brothers of the house, startled from their prayers, would watch as tall figures entered without a sound. Their cloaks would be soaked from rain, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods. One would lay a heavy pouch upon the altar, silver coins glinting in the candlelight, while another murmured words of blessing in Latin older than Rome. No questions would be asked. By dawn, the strangers would be gone, leaving only the faint scent of horses and the feeling that something vast and ancient had brushed against the mortal world. This is the hush in which our story begins. Not the clash of swords or the roar of armies, but the quiet persistence of memory. The Black Knights of Europe, if they existed, were born not only of steel and oath but of the human need to believe that ideals cannot be so easily extinguished. When power seeks to erase the noble and the mysterious, legends rise like mist from the earth, refusing to be chained. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let these images drift across your mind. The soft thud of hooves on wet leaves, the gleam of blackened mail beneath a crescent moon, the murmur of prayers carried on a cold night wind. Whether these riders were flesh and blood or spirits of a people's longing, they travel still across the landscapes of history and dream, inviting us to follow. And so, with the echoes of that first midnight journey, we begin our long, quiet exploration of the Templar order time forgot, the hidden brotherhood known only in whispers as the Black Knights of Europe. The air over Burgundy in the early 14th century was heavy with the smell of earth and wine. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, patched with vineyards, dotted with villages clustered around their parish steeples. By day, oxen plowed the fields, bells marked the hours, and the chatter of markets filled the squares. But by night, when the torches guttered out and only the moonlight shone upon the tiled roofs, the land belonged to whispers and shadows. It is in these shadows that legends place the Black Knights, not as phantoms yet, but as fugitives. Burgundy had long been a crossroads of Europe, an artery through which merchants, crusaders, and scholars passed. It was also a land where loyalty to Rome mixed uneasily with loyalty to crown. Here, in lonely priories and fortified manors, remnants of the Templar order may have found shelter. Imagine a crumbling commandery hidden among the vines. Its chapel roof sagged, its walls pocked by the arrows of forgotten feuds. Yet beneath its floor lay crypts carved in the age of Charlemagne, stone passages leading down into cool darkness. In such places, a company of knights could vanish. They would strip their white mantles, blacken their armor with ash and pitch, and learn the art of moving unseen. The people of Burgundy, superstitious yet practical, had little reason to betray them. For generations, the Templars had guarded roads, lent coin to farmers, and provided grain in lean seasons. Now, though officially condemned, their memory still commanded respect. A shepherd leading his flock at dawn might glimpse horsemen on a ridge, their armor dulled against the sky, and say nothing. A vintner might find silver slipped beneath his door, a quiet price for silence. The church sent inquisitors, men trained to sniff out heresy like hounds. They rode into towns with parchment and seal, demanding confessions, offering pardons for names. But inquisitors could not be everywhere, and the hills of Burgundy were labyrinthine. More than once, an inquisitor's party vanished into the forests, their horses found wandering days later, their riders never seen again. Some whispered that the Black Knights had taken them, punishing cruelty with silence. Others believed it was simply the work of bandits. In legend, the lines blur. The Black Knights, according to folklore, carried with them something more than swords. Stories tell of scrolls wrapped in oiled leather, written in scripts no scholar could read. Some said these were maps to hidden treasures buried beneath cathedrals. Others believed they were fragments of wisdom gathered in the East, knowledge of stars and numbers, of healing herbs and metals that transmuted in fire. Whether such relics existed or not, their mere rumor gave the fugitives an aura of power. In the villages, the presence of the knights seeped into folklore. Children were warned not to wander into the forests at dusk, lest they be carried off by riders cloaked in black. At the same time, mothers prayed for those same riders to watch over their sons who traveled dangerous roads. The Black Knights became both menace and guardian, figures of fear and hope intertwined. Picture a winter night in one of Burgundy's small monasteries. Snow drifts against the cloister walls. The monks chant softly by the glow of tallow candles. Suddenly, the great doors creak open. A blast of icy air sweeps through, and with it, figures cloaked in black. Their faces are hidden, their boots leave wet marks on the stone floor. One lays a pouch of silver on the altar. Another bows low before the crucifix, his head bent in reverence. Not a word is spoken. By the time dawn breaks, they are gone. The silver remains, enough to feed the poor of 3 villages. The monks never record the visit, but the memory lingers in their dreams. The Duke of Burgundy, ever alert to matters of power, surely heard these tales. His court was a tangle of alliances, a web connecting France, the Empire, and the papacy. To harbor fugitives openly would have risked wrath, yet to crush them might mean losing skilled warriors who could serve in secret. Perhaps this is why the Black Knights were never hunted as relentlessly here as in Paris. In the margins of politics, survival is often bought with silence. Centuries later, travelers in Burgundy would claim to see traces of the order. A ruined tower with carvings of strange symbols, a field where no crops would grow though the soil was rich, a chapel whose crypt held a blackened sword upon its altar. Antiquarians would dismiss these as local curiosities, but to the villagers, they were proof. The Black Knights had been here, their presence woven into the very stones. Imagine walking those hills at twilight, the vineyards hushed, the last light fading from the west. A hush falls, deeper than silence, as though the earth itself listens. Then, faintly, the sound of hooves, measured, steady, approaching along a road no longer marked on any map. The riders pass, dark against the stars, and vanish beyond the horizon. You awaken from your reverie unsure whether you dreamed, or whether the centuries briefly parted to let the past walk again. The shadows of Burgundy are not empty. They are filled with memory, rumor, and the enduring shape of a brotherhood that refused to die. It is here, among the vines and the hills, that the story of the Black Knights begins to deepen, their legend taking root in the soil of Europe. As you close your eyes tonight, let your thoughts drift through those silent hills. Hear the whisper of wind in the vines, the rustle of cloaks in the dark, the low murmur of a prayer spoken by hidden men. Whether they were flesh or myth, their shadows stretch long across time, guiding us toward the next chapter of their hidden journey. The night is a great concealer. Beneath its deep indigo veil, shapes dissolve, colors fade, and only what glimmers faintly in starlight remains. It was beneath such nights, so the stories say, that the fugitives of the old Templar order shed their white mantles and clothed themselves in black. A simple change of cloth, yet one that recast them entirely, no longer the holy warriors of Jerusalem, but a new brotherhood that answered only to the quiet calling of survival. The white mantle of the traditional Templar had always been more than a garment. It proclaimed purity, discipline, and an oath to a visible cause. To wear it was to be recognized instantly by peasant and king alike, and to accept a burden of expectation. The bearer must be without stain, a servant of the cross. But the white cloth that once protected the knights now invited the fire of accusation. It was a beacon to inquisitors, a target to the agents of Philip and his allies. So the mantle darkened. Some chronicles describe black wool steeped in oak bark dye, heavy as a storm cloud. Others speak of leather boiled in pitch, or of cloaks rubbed with soot until no trace of the old emblem remained. There is poetry in this, for black absorbs light. Where once they had stood as a mirror of heavenly brightness, the new brotherhood chose a color that swallowed the gaze and refused easy definition. Legends from Burgundy, the Rhine, and the Breton coast tell of midnight gatherings in ruined chapels where the first of these garments were prepared. Picture a circle of men and a few steadfast women, faces lit only by candle stubs, cutting old mantles into strips. The hiss of hot dye, the scent of iron kettles, the low murmur of Latin prayers. They worked without haste, as though the transformation were a ritual of its own. When dawn approached, each cloak lay drying upon the cold stones like the wing of a great night bird. The new mantle was more than camouflage. It was a declaration of independence from the powers that had betrayed them. Black, in the medieval mind, carried many meanings. It could signify humility and penance, a monk's surrender of worldly vanity. But it also evoked mystery, hidden wisdom, and the infinite depth of the cosmos. In alchemical texts, black was the nigredo, the first stage of transformation when matter is broken down so that it may be remade. To choose black, then, was to choose a path of death and rebirth. Travelers' accounts written decades later describe encounters with horsemen clad head to heel in sable, their faces veiled. A merchant near Ghent swore that such riders escorted his caravan through a fog-choked wood, accepting no payment but a whispered blessing. A nun in Avignon recorded a vision of knights of shadow who prayed without ceasing, their black garments blending with the night as they vanished beyond her cloister walls. Whether these were sightings of flesh and blood or dream and rumor mattered little. The image of the black-cloaked guardian took hold. As the cloak changed, so too did the code of the order. No longer could they trumpet their presence in courts or commanderies. Silence became sacrament. Their vows, once spoken before altar and bishop, were now exchanged in whispers beside forest fires or beneath crumbling vaults. Brotherhood was sealed not by public ceremony but by shared secrecy. A fragment of a later manuscript speaks of the oath of the veil, wherein each knight promised to defend the innocent, to guard the forgotten wisdom of the East, and to live unseen until the world was ready to remember them. The black mantle also served practical ends. On moonless roads it rendered the rider nearly invisible. In the candlelight of a market tavern it marked nothing more than a humble traveler. Unlike the white Templar cloak, it bore no heraldry. Each man could move as an individual, yet recognize his companions by small signs. A silver ring etched with a star, a knot in the leather thong that tied the cloak. Such tokens became the new banners of a hidden army. Beneath the surface of this transformation lay a spiritual dimension. Medieval mystics often wrote of the divine darkness, the cloud of unknowing in which God might be most truly found. By embracing black, the fugitives may have felt themselves entering that sacred obscurity, shedding worldly labels to seek a deeper communion. Some later legends even suggest that the Black Knights welcomed seekers from many faiths, Jews fleeing persecution, Sufi travelers from Al-Andalus, hermits who spoke of stars and numbers. In the darkness of their gatherings, the boundaries of creed blurred like the edges of candlelight. Imagine, if you will, a meeting in a forgotten Burgundian chapel late in the year 1315. The roof leaks, moonlight pools upon damp flagstones. Around a stone altar stand a dozen figures, their faces shadowed by black hoods. A single lamp flickers, its flame drawing long reflections across their steel. One by one they step forward, laying down tokens, a coin from Outremer, a splinter of cedar from Mount Lebanon, a small vial of desert sand. Each token a memory of the Crusades, each a pledge that the knowledge gathered there will not be lost. The leader, his voice low, steady, pronounces a blessing not in the Latin of Rome, but in a mixture of tongues learned on far-off shores. When the lamp is snuffed, the chamber returns to perfect darkness, and the Brotherhood, reborn, disperses into the night. Through the years that followed, the black mantle became a symbol not merely of escape but of quiet resistance. In village festivals across France and the Low Countries, masked riders sometimes appeared dressed head to foot in black, scattering coins or loaves of bread to the poor. Children called them les chevaliers du soir, the knights of evening. Some parish priests condemned these appearances as pagan misrule, yet many peasants saw in them a blessing. Even centuries later, rural folk tales spoke of the men in black cloaks who come when the harvest fails. Historians, cautious as always, seek mundane explanations. Outlaw bands who adopted the legend to frighten their enemies, merchants' guilds using mystery to protect trade secrets. But the persistence of the black-cloaked figure, across languages, across generations, suggests something deeper, a memory too stubborn to fade. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, picture that mantle for yourself. Feel the weight of the heavy wool across your shoulders, the soft rasp of fabric dyed with oak and ash. Hear the quiet of the forest around you, the muted breath of your horse. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bell tolls the midnight hour. You are hidden, yet connected to a purpose older than kings, a purpose that moves silently through the world. The black mantle is more than cloth. It is the night itself, endless, patient, protective. Wrapped in it, the riders passed unseen through the centuries, carrying their vows like a secret flame. And so their story continues, deeper into the labyrinth of Europe, where new alliances await and the legend of the Black Knights grows ever darker, ever more enduring. The world of medieval Europe thrummed with quiet networks of favor and obligation. Behind the clang of swords and the proclamations of kings, wealth and power flowed through subtler channels. Merchant guilds, monastic treasuries, noble households that owed one another debts of coin and kinship. It was in this half-seen economy of influence that the Black Knights, if they truly moved through history, found their lifeline. When the Templar order fell, their enemies imagined they had severed every route. Castles were seized, accounts frozen, their great banking network dismantled. Yet money, like water, seeks new courses when the river is dammed. The fugitives who rode under the black mantle understood this better than anyone. They had once pioneered the art of hidden transfer, letters of credit that crossed seas, sealed chests that changed hands in silence. Now they used those same arts for their own survival. Picture a narrow street in Bruges on a misty evening. The city hums with the quiet wealth of wool and spice. Behind a shuttered upper room, a merchant counts silver coins by the light of a single lamp. Across from him sits a hooded figure whose cloak drinks in the glow. No names are exchanged. A parchment is signed with a sigil shaped like a black cross. At dawn, a shipment of grain bound for a famine-stricken village will leave the quay, its expenses mysteriously paid. The merchant will never speak of the encounter, but his coffers will swell in seasons to come. Such was the rhythm of hidden patronage. Not only merchants played this game. Certain noble houses, especially those with Templar blood in their lineage, are whispered to have offered quiet sanctuary. The Counts of Foy in the Pyrenees, the Dukes of Burgundy, even minor lords along the Rhine are said to have opened hunting lodges and remote keeps where black-cloaked riders might rest. Hospitality required no proclamation. A single candle burning in a high tower at midnight was enough to guide a weary band to safety. Why would nobles risk papal censure or royal reprisal? Some owed debts of gratitude. The Templars had long safeguarded trade routes and lent coin in times of war. Others shared a deeper sympathy, a belief that the knights possessed wisdom worth protecting, or that the charges of heresy were nothing more than a king's greed wearing a bishop's robes. And for a few, the calculation was purely practical. Men trained in battle, fluent in languages, and skilled in finance were valuable allies in a Europe where alliances shifted like sand. The church itself, despite its public condemnation, was not monolithic. In remote monasteries and learned abbeys there were abbots who quietly admired the fallen order. They too might leave a side door unbarred, a cellar stocked with bread and wine. In certain illuminated manuscripts of the 14th century, historians have noticed curious marginalia, tiny black crosses inked beside passages of the Psalms, as if a scribe wished to signal fellowship to unseen brethren. These patrons provided more than food and shelter. They became conduits of information. Through them, the Black Knights could learn of inquisitors' routes, royal decrees, and rumors of distant ports where sympathetic captains waited. Messages traveled in layers of disguise. A wine invoice whose numbers concealed a date, a psalm whose first letters spelled a place, a merchant's seal with a barely perceptible nick that meant safe to proceed. Consider the great fairs of Champagne, where traders from across Europe gathered each year. Amid the bustle of cloth and spice, a single black-cloaked figure could pass unnoticed, exchanging coded greetings with allies from Venice or the Hanseatic League. At night, when the stalls were dark and only the moonlit canvas swayed, deals were struck that would send coin and supplies along hidden routes reaching from the Baltic to the Levant. Legends speak, too, of royal eyes turned discreetly aside. In Scotland, Robert the Bruce waged a struggle against England and defied papal excommunication. Chroniclers hint that black-clad warriors fought beside him at Bannockburn, their origins politely unrecorded. In Portugal, King Denis rechartered Templar lands under the new name of the Order of Christ, a move some say allowed fugitives to keep their holdings under a different banner. Whether these were deliberate shelters or mere coincidences, they gave the Black Knights room to breathe. As years rolled into decades, the relationship between hidden knights and hidden patrons became almost symbiotic. Merchants gained skilled protectors and access to secret routes. Nobles received discreet agents capable of diplomacy or sudden force. And the Black Knights found what they needed most, a way to persist without revealing themselves. Their legend grew not from open battles, but from the quiet certainty that they could be anywhere, supported by hands unseen. Imagine a winter evening in a remote alpine pass. Snow falls thick and soft, muffling every sound. In the courtyard of a mountain inn, a noblewoman waits, her cloak drawn tight against the cold. From the dark woods emerges a line of riders, their armor black as the sky. They dismount without a word. A small chest changes hands, its lock carved with a pattern of stars. The woman bows her head in acknowledgement, and the riders vanish back into the storm. Centuries later, travelers will still speak of that inn as a place where strangers of quiet power once met beneath the shadowed peaks. To historians, the evidence for such patronage is scattered like faint constellations. A sudden appearance of wealth in a minor abbey, a ledger with unexplained entries, a traveler's tale recorded long after the fact. Yet taken together, these glimmers suggest a network that outlived the public fall of the Templars. It was not an empire of stone and banner, but of trust, secrecy, and shared need. As you settle into stillness, imagine those countless exchanges across Europe's nightscape, the soft knock on a postern gate, the slide of a coin purse across a table, the brief meeting of eyes that confirms a silent pact. No proclamations, no triumphal processions, only the quiet assurance that help will come, that the road remains open. The Black Knights did not survive by force of arms alone. They survived because others, hidden in plain sight, believed that some truths are worth preserving even when the world has turned against them. Their patrons, unseen and unrecorded, became the invisible pillars of a legend that would echo for centuries. And so, in the hush of these alliances, the Brotherhood found its strength. The black mantle cloaked their bodies, but the kindness of secret friends cloaked their future. As the lamps of Europe flickered and died each night, another light, quieter, steadier, burned in the hearts of those who chose to help them. It is that quiet light that carries us onward, deeper into the long midnight history of the order time forgot. The world of the early 14th century was restless. Kingdoms shifted like sandbars in a changing tide. Merchants carried rumors as readily as spices. Faith itself seemed to wander across borders. Though the Great Crusades to the Holy Land had largely ended, Europe still dreamed of holy wars and distant sanctuaries. Into this unsettled night the Black Knights moved, quiet travelers who no longer raised banners, yet who, if the legends are to be believed, waged their own hidden campaigns. No chronicler recorded these journeys in the open pages of history. They appear instead in glimmers and half-told tales. A ship sighted off the Breton coast with black sails under a moonless sky. A convoy of riders in the Carpathians who left behind no tracks at dawn. A burned village on the edges of the Baltic whose survivors spoke of foreign brethren who drove back raiders and vanished before thanks could be given. Such fragments form the outline of what later generations would call the Silent Crusades. Unlike the wars proclaimed by popes and kings, these crusades were not about seizing territory or erecting stone fortresses. They were, if the whispers hold truth, missions of protection and retrieval, quiet efforts to preserve what others sought to destroy. A monastery rumored to house rare Greek manuscripts might awaken one morning to find a portion of its library missing, carried off before soldiers of a hostile lord could torch the place. A caravan of refugees fleeing across the Pyrenees might find, in its darkest hour, black-cloaked escorts who guided them through hidden passes and then melted into the woods. One story, told in the ports of the Adriatic, speaks of a fleet of merchant vessels suddenly appearing to repel pirates off the Dalmatian coast. The captains of those ships never revealed who had paid them, but sailors swore that men in black armor gave silent orders from the shadows of the decks. When the threat was gone, the strangers left no trace but a single silver coin stamped with a star, an emblem known to few but the initiates of the old order. If these tales carry even a spark of truth, they suggest a brotherhood that saw itself as guardian rather than conqueror. The Black Knights may have understood that the treasures worth saving were not merely gold or relics, but knowledge, scrolls of medicine gathered in the East, treatises of astronomy, fragments of philosophy that might have been condemned as heresy. They had once served a church that feared such ideas. Now they served the ideas themselves, carrying wisdom across frontiers as quietly as the wind. Imagine them at work. A small group, perhaps 6 riders, meeting at a ruined priory on a fog-laden night. Maps are unrolled, faded parchments marked with cryptic signs. They speak in low voices of a distant abbey threatened by war, of a scholar who carries secrets worth more than kingdoms. By dawn they are gone, their plans sealed in silence. Days later, villagers near a mountain pass glimpse their dark silhouettes guiding a mule train heavy with books and instruments. Before soldiers arrive, the knowledge has vanished into safer hands. The silent crusades also carried a subtler purpose, the protection of people. In an age when persecution flared like sudden fire, Jews, heretics, and wandering mystics often needed help to survive. Legends describe black-cloaked riders who appeared at night to guide families across dangerous borders or to escort exiled scholars to hidden havens. Some stories even speak of Sufi travelers from Al-Andalus meeting these knights and exchanging gifts of poetry and star lore beneath the open sky. Such encounters hint at a brotherhood whose faith had widened beyond the rigid walls of Rome. Having seen the mosaic of beliefs in the Holy Land, perhaps they recognized that truth wore many faces. In their secret work they found kinship not through doctrine but through shared devotion to wisdom and mercy. Across northern Europe, the order's quiet campaigns left faint but curious marks. In the Hanseatic cities of the Baltic, merchant ledgers record unexplained payments during years of plague, funds used to feed entire neighborhoods when official aid failed. In the forests of Bohemia, woodcutters told of strangers who built sturdy footbridges overnight, easing the journey of pilgrims. And in the high Alps, a single carved stone still bears a black cross and the Latin words Custodes Silentiae, guardians of silence. To live such a life demanded more than courage. It required patience deeper than the sea. These riders could claim no victories, erect no monuments. Their reward was the quiet knowledge that something precious had been saved, though the world might never know their names. For men trained in the fanfare of crusade, this must have been a different kind of vow, to act without recognition, to disappear after the deed. Picture, as you drift toward sleep, a night in the dense forests of the Carpathians. Snow drifts between the trees. A small campfire glows faintly, barely enough to warm the hands of the figures gathered round. They speak in murmurs, Latin mingling with Slavic words, a phrase of Arabic now and then. A parchment map is folded, a token exchanged. By first light they will separate, each riding toward a different horizon, their mission bound in secrecy. Centuries later, when scholars try to trace the afterlife of the Templars, these faint tracks remain. A book in a Venetian library with a provenance too old to explain, a navigational chart that predates known exploration of the Atlantic, a fragment of alchemical formula copied in a hand no one can place. Perhaps these are the echoes of the silent crusades, the work of writers who believed that guarding the seed of knowledge was itself a holy war. The great crusades of banners and trumpets have long faded into the pages of history. But the quiet journeys, the unheralded rescues, the preservation of wisdom, these may be the truest crusades of all. No pope declared them, no king financed them, and yet they endured, guided by an oath spoken only in the hush of midnight. As the world outside your window softens into darkness, let the image of those hidden riders settle in your mind, black mantles blending with the night, hooves muffled on forest paths, hearts set on a purpose too precious for proclamation. Their crusade was not of conquest but of care, a pilgrimage through silence, carrying the light of knowledge across a darkened age. The old chronicles tell us little, yet the night seems to remember. Beneath the hush of moonlit abbeys and forgotten cellars, the Black Knights, those fugitives of the Templar fall, are said to have turned their restless minds toward a different kind of quest. No longer could they raise banners or hold castles. their crusade now unfolded in the realm of hidden knowledge. This chapter belongs to the whisper of bellows and the gleam of metal in firelight, to the patient labor of alchemy. Alchemists of the Middle Ages were seekers of many things: the elixir of life, the stone that might transmute base metal into gold, the secret harmonies of the stars. To some they were charlatans, to others, philosophers wrapped in mystery. The Black Knights, if we trust the murmurs that have drifted down the centuries, became their quiet companions. Imagine a stone room deep beneath an abandoned commandery in Burgundy. The air is cool and carries the faint scent of damp earth and burning charcoal. Along the walls stand shelves lined with flasks of tinted glass and jars sealed with wax. A single lamp throws a soft, amber glow across the table where 3 figures work. Their black mantles are hung aside, leather aprons shield their chests. One stirs a crucible with a slender rod, another measures powders of ground crystal and salt. The third reads from a battered parchment whose ink glints like midnight. These men, perhaps once warriors of the cross, lean over their experiments with the patience of monks. The clang of battle has faded from their lives. The quiet hiss of the furnace is now their only drumbeat. Their goal, the stories say, is not mere gold. Gold could be seized by kings and taxed by bishops. What they sought was subtler, the purification of matter and, through it, the purification of the soul. For the medieval mind, alchemy was never only chemistry. It was a spiritual mirror. The dark stage of Nigredo, when materials blacken and decay, symbolized the death of the old self. From this would rise the albedo, a whitening of the spirit, and finally the rubedo, the reddening of perfection. The Black Knights, wrapped already in black mantles and cut off from their former lives, must have felt an echo of their own transformation in these steps. Their exile was their Nigredo. The work of the furnace became their path toward inner light. Legends of their experiments traveled quietly across Europe. In the Low Countries, merchants told of silent brothers who purchased rare minerals, antimony, mercury, powdered gems, paying in heavy silver coins of mysterious mint. Along the Rhine, villagers spoke of midnight lights glowing from ruined towers, as if the stones themselves contained captured stars. A scribe in Prague recorded the visit of strangers clad in sable garments, who requested ancient texts of Arabic science and left behind a pouch of gold dust finer than sand. What did these experiments yield? Some tales claim they discovered medicines that eased the plague's fever or powders that strengthened steel. Others speak of inks that never faded, of glass that sang when touched, of subtle perfumes that calmed the heart and cleared the mind. Whether true or not, these wonders hint at a purpose beyond greed. Perhaps the Black Knights sought to preserve knowledge at risk of being lost, remedies from distant lands, secrets gathered in the courts of Damascus or the libraries of Cairo. It is said they corresponded with scholars who themselves walked a careful line between faiths. Jewish physicians fleeing persecution in Spain, Sufi mystics versed in celestial mathematics, wandering scholars from the Byzantine East, all are woven into the stories. Meetings took place at twilight in mountain passes, in quiet rooms above busy inns, in gardens where the scent of herbs masked the smell of the forge. No single creed bound them. Instead, a shared reverence for hidden wisdom drew these travelers together like moths to a single, unseen flame. Picture a night on the Ligurian coast. A ship lies at anchor, its sails furled. On the shore, a small fire burns low. Around it sit 5 figures, 2 in black mantles, one in the robes of a Moorish astronomer, another a Jewish physician, the 5th a woman from the mountain villages whose eyes reflect the firelight with unearthly calm. They speak in many tongues, Latin, Arabic, Occitan, trading not wealth but ideas, the movement of planets, the virtues of rare metals, the mathematics of harmony. By dawn the fire is gone and the beach is empty, save for a circle of stones and the faint perfume of burning myrrh. Some chroniclers, those who feared anything beyond the church's sanction, painted such meetings as dark pacts. They spoke of forbidden rites, of spirits summoned in smoke. But others, centuries later, would look back and see in these stories the seeds of the Renaissance, a mingling of traditions that refused to die, a quiet preparation for an age when science and art would awaken together. The Black Knights themselves left no treatises. Their lessons, if any survived, were hidden in subtle places. A marginal note in a medical manuscript, a cipher etched into a cathedral's stained glass, a formula disguised as a prayer. Even now, a historian leafing through forgotten folios might pause at an oddly precise drawing of a furnace, a star chart inked in a hand too steady for a casual monk. The marks are there for those patient enough to look. As centuries passed, the legend of the Black Knights as alchemists grew richer. Travelers spoke of a stone of midnight, said to bring clarity of mind rather than wealth of gold. Others whispered of a red elixir that healed the gravely ill. These tales may be only the dream work of those who long for miracles. Yet they remind us that the greatest transformations often remain invisible. A sickness eased, a mind awakened, a spirit strengthened. Close your eyes and imagine the quiet of one of their hidden laboratories. The furnace breathes with a low sigh. Copper vessels gleam in the lamplight. Outside, the wind stirs the leaves of an ancient oak. Inside, a single figure stirs a mixture the color of dawn, watching patiently as vapors curl upward like silver ghosts. No words are spoken, only the gentle rhythm of experiment, the trust that change is possible, slow, unseen, but real. The Black Knights may have vanished from the chronicles of kings, but in these moments of alchemical pursuit they found a different immortality. Their work was less about gold than about understanding, a belief that matter and spirit, body and cosmos, were reflections of one great mystery. To touch even the edge of that mystery was worth a lifetime of quiet labor. So as night deepens around you, let your thoughts drift to those secret workshops hidden beneath ruined towers. Hear the soft crackle of the fire, the distant hoot of an owl, the careful clink of glass. The riders of the Black Mantle have laid aside their swords. Their crusade is one of patience and transformation. In the hush of their alchemical vigils, the world itself seems to breathe, waiting, like you, for the next turning of the wheel. As Europe's landscapes stretch northward, the gentle hills and vineyards give way to denser forests, windswept plains, and the cold glimmer of rivers threading through towns and castles. In these northern reaches, the Germanic states, the Baltic coast, and the forests of the north, the Black Knights, some whisper, found a new theater for their hidden endeavors. Here, where kings struggled against rebellious lords and where pagan practices lingered along remote rivers, their watch continued silently, unseen and unrecorded. The Northern Watch was not a formal army. There were no banners or drums, no calls to arms. Instead, it was a presence, figures who rode in black mantles beneath the cloak of night, whose skill with sword and strategy was matched only by patience and discretion. They moved like shadows along trade routes, through borderlands where law was fragile and danger abundant. Merchants, travelers, and pilgrims passing along these roads might glimpse them for a heartbeat, black shapes against the frost, horses' hooves muffled on the frozen ground, and then see nothing more. In the towns along the Elbe and the Oder, chroniclers centuries later recorded mysterious events. A caravan attacked the northern seas, too, became their domain. Traders' accounts sometimes speak of ships arriving in storm-lashed harbors, piloted by black-cloaked figures who guided them safely past reefs and shoals. In some cases, these mariners carried secret cargo, manuscripts, religious relics, or navigational instruments gathered from far-off lands. The Black Knight's knowledge of geography, tides, and hidden harbors became a weapon as subtle as any blade. Perhaps most remarkable was the Order's adaptation to the harsh northern climate. Frost could freeze rivers overnight. Blizzards could trap travelers for days. The knights learned to survive in isolation, making use of huts abandoned by monks, stables left empty by farmers, and natural caves in the forests. Firewood was gathered silently, provisions rationed carefully, and watch shifts organized so that even in the coldest months, a small party could remain on the move indefinitely. Legends hint that some of these northern expeditions were collaborative with other secretive groups. Friars who had preserved knowledge of herbs and remedies, wandering scholars fleeing religious persecution, and even foreign merchants familiar with the seas may have all interacted with the Black Knights. These encounters were brief, highly coded, and often left no record beyond faint notes in personal journals or small, cryptic symbols carved in stone. As the centuries passed, the memory of these northern operations became woven into folklore. Villagers along the Baltic and the Rhineland would tell of black-cloaked riders seen only on nights of full moon, delivering aid, guiding travelers, or simply appearing at crossroads before vanishing. Fishermen spoke of lights in remote towers, winds that shifted to protect ships, and voices heard through the fog offering direction. For the Black Knights, the Northern Watch was both practical and symbolic. It embodied a principle that vigilance, courage, and subtlety could protect life and knowledge even when all outward structures had failed. Their purpose was quiet, their victories invisible, yet their impact rippled outward, touching communities, scholars, and travelers who would never know their saviors' names. So, as you sink deeper into sleep, imagine those northern landscapes, the frost-slick roads, the dark forests, the frozen rivers reflecting starlight. See the Black Knights moving silently among the trees, their black mantles blending with the night, hooves muffled, eyes alert. Feel the patience of their watch, the quiet strength of their protection. No banners rise, no trumpets sound, only the steadfast guardianship of men and women committed to preserving what the world often overlooks: safety, knowledge, and mercy. In this hush, their legend grows. A presence in shadow, an echo in the northern wind, a quiet rhythm that persists far longer than the fleeting applause of kings and chroniclers. Across the Channel, England in the 14th century was a land of green hills, winding rivers, and ancient forests, yet beneath this serene surface there was unrest. Dynasties rose and fell, feudal lords jockeyed for power, and the church maintained a careful watch over every diocese. Into this landscape of subtle tension, the Black Knights are said to have brought what some chroniclers later called the English Veil, a quiet presence, hidden in plain sight, yet extending their guardianship across the land. Unlike the open campaigns of the Crusades or the careful movements along northern trade routes, the English Veil relied heavily on discretion, subterfuge, and subtle alliances. The knights moved among the towns and forests like shadows, their black mantles as familiar to the mist as they were unfamiliar to the people they protected. Sometimes they posed as simple travelers or merchants. At other times they became guides, messengers, or even teachers in small, cloistered schools. Every action was deliberate, designed to preserve lives and knowledge without drawing notice. Consider the ancient forests of Sherwood and Yorkshire, where travelers could vanish along hidden paths. Legends speak of lone riders who appeared at dusk to guide pilgrims through treacherous woods or past brigands. A cloaked figure might silently signal a safer route by the placement of a twig or a subtle mark on a tree. By dawn, the rider had disappeared, leaving only the faint sense of protection behind. Children who glimpsed them described the figures as tall and imposing, yet gentle in movement, like guardians of the night rather than warriors seeking conquest. In towns and villages, the Black Knights leveraged networks of sympathetic allies. Local priests, merchants, and minor lords often provided safe houses or left coded messages that indicated a shelter was available. One might leave a lantern lit in a particular window. Another might place a carved cross in a specific pattern on a gatepost. These simple signs ensured the safe passage of knights, scholars, or travelers, forming an invisible web of protection across the English countryside. The veil also extended into the realm of knowledge. England contained libraries and monastic collections with texts from across Europe, medical treatises, astronomical charts, philosophical works. These manuscripts were vulnerable to the whims of feudal lords, inquisitors, or fires that could sweep through a wooden abbey. The Black Knights, working quietly, transported, copied, or concealed important documents. A monk might awaken one morning to find certain books gone, only to discover years later that they had resurfaced safely in a distant abbey, intact and unreadable by those who would have destroyed them. Some accounts hint at a broader purpose, the preservation of ideas deemed dangerous by powerful authorities. Scholars who questioned prevailing doctrines, healers practicing ancient remedies, and even wandering philosophers were often helped to move or hide, escorted under the cloak of night. The English veil, then, was not merely a matter of physical protection but of intellectual preservation, ensuring that knowledge survived the turbulence of politics, religion, and war. Royal courts, too, were touched by the knight's presence, though rarely acknowledged. In certain letters and accounts, minor nobles mention mysterious advisors who appeared without introduction and departed as quietly as they came. One chronicler notes a black figure who whispered counsel on fortification and strategy during a northern rebellion. No names were recorded, no claims of heroism were made. Yet those subtle interventions shaped the course of events, keeping fragile alliances intact and preventing bloodshed that might have altered the kingdom's trajectory. In coastal towns like Dover and Bristol, the Black Knights reportedly played a role in the protection of maritime trade. Raiders and pirates prowled the waters, and merchants faced great peril on long journeys. Stories describe black-mantled riders appearing on foggy nights to guide ships through dangerous channels or to warn of storms. Sometimes small vessels would be seen moving in perfect formation across the mist, as if guided by invisible hands. To sailors, the presence of the knights became a legend of hope, a reassurance that even the vast, treacherous sea could be navigated safely. The English veil also held a symbolic meaning. England, with its dense forests and rolling hills, provided cover but also tested endurance. Knights moving under the veil learned to blend with the land, to observe quietly, and to act without recognition. Their strength lay not in the clash of swords but in the subtle control of information, guidance, and timing. In a sense, the veil was both practical and philosophical, a commitment to vigilance, patience, and restraint. Picture a winter evening near Canterbury. Snow falls softly, covering the cobbled streets and timbered roofs. A small group of black-cloaked figures moves silently between buildings, carrying bundles of manuscripts and medicinal herbs. In the shadows, they pause outside a monastery, signaling with a small lantern hung at the correct angle. A monk emerges, wordless, and accepts the parcels. By the time the night watch counts their own rounds, the knights are gone, leaving no trace but the assurance that the night is safer than it had been before. This quiet work was sometimes dangerous. England in the 14th century was a land of shifting loyalties, feudal disputes, and occasional uprisings. A black knight caught in the wrong place could be accused of treason or heresy. Yet the Brotherhood, guided by the lessons of their earlier years, moved with precision, avoiding open confrontation while exerting influence where it was most needed. Their victories were invisible, their failures quietly absorbed into the night. As centuries passed, tales of the English veil merged with folklore and legend. Villagers whispered of black-cloaked riders who appeared before storms, guided lost children home, or delivered medicine to the sick. In later centuries, antiquarians found traces of secret markings in abbeys and old houses, small black crosses etched in hidden corners, perhaps left by those who had once walked the Vale. These traces, small and easily overlooked, are consistent with the idea of a network that valued discretion above all else. To imagine the English Vale is to imagine patience, subtlety, and protection. The knights moved unseen, intervening without glory, preserving lives and knowledge for generations yet to come. They were guardians of a quiet order, maintaining the balance between danger and safety, between destruction and survival. As you drift into sleep, picture those silent nights across England. Hear the faint crunch of snow under a horse's hooves. See the black mantles blend with the forest shadows, the river mists, and the fog-filled streets. Feel the quiet assurance of protection, the invisible hand guiding travelers, safeguarding knowledge, and quietly shaping the night. The English Vale, like the Northern Watch before it, demonstrates a truth that is often forgotten. Influence does not always declare itself with trumpets. Sometimes the most enduring acts are those carried out in darkness, without recognition, but with perfect fidelity to purpose. And in that quiet, the legend of the Black Knights continues to grow, like a slow pulse through the heart of Europe. Far to the southwest, the Iberian Peninsula stretches between sunlit coasts and rugged mountains, a land of ancient cities, olive groves, and winding rivers. In the 14th century, it was a region of contrasts, kingdoms at war with one another, cities thrumming with trade, and the quiet persistence of cultures both old and new. Into this complex and shifting landscape, the Black Knights, according to legend, brought what some chroniclers later called the Iberian Passage, a hidden route of protection, knowledge, and diplomacy that wove through kingdoms and across borders. The Iberian Passage was not a road marked on any map. It was an invisible network, a series of safe houses, hidden paths, and trusted contacts that allowed those in danger to travel undetected. Merchants fleeing political instability, scholars escaping inquisitorial scrutiny, and even nobles caught in the crossfire of rival courts could sometimes find guidance along this passage. The knights acted as guardians, silently shepherding people and knowledge through difficult terrain, often relying on the support of sympathetic local allies. Consider the forests and mountains of Galicia and Asturias. Dense oak and chestnut trees created corridors of shadow, where travelers could move with relative safety if guided correctly. Small villages, perched on hillsides, served as way stations. A black-cloaked rider might arrive at twilight, signal a hidden entrance to a cellar or barn, and depart before anyone noticed. By dawn, the caravan or scholar was gone, moving along a secret path to a safer region. Such journeys required patience, keen observation, and the quiet courage to move through hostile terrain without leaving traces. The knights' work in Iberia often intersected with the lingering influence of Islamic and Jewish scholarship. Libraries in Toledo and Córdoba contained manuscripts of Greek, Roman, and Arabic knowledge, and many scholars moved between cities in search of patrons and protection. The Black Knights reportedly facilitated such movements, ensuring that valuable texts on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy were carried safely, copied if necessary, and preserved for future generations. Their role was not only physical protection but also the quiet preservation of culture and learning, acting as custodians of wisdom in a turbulent age. In the towns of Castile and Aragon, merchants and minor nobles occasionally left signs to indicate that travelers were welcome or that supplies could be found. A lantern hung at a certain angle, a particular arrangement of stones on a path, a carved cross in a doorway, all served as subtle signals. The knights themselves traveled lightly, blending with ordinary merchants or pilgrims, always observing the rules of discretion. Their presence was felt only in the safety and success of those they guided. The Black Knights also engaged in diplomacy, albeit quietly. In border regions between Christian and Muslim territories, minor conflicts often flared unpredictably. A dispute over grazing rights, a miscommunication between towns, or a raid along a river could escalate quickly. The knights, moving unseen, sometimes delivered messages or mediated in secret. They spoke in hushed tones to local lords, navigated complex local customs, and helped prevent violence without ever claiming credit. Their influence was subtle, yet it shaped outcomes that might have otherwise led to bloodshed. Maritime routes along the Iberian coast were another focus of their work. The ports of Valencia, Seville, and Lisbon saw fleets of merchants and traders, vulnerable to pirates or hostile navies. The knights occasionally guided ships through fog-laden harbors, delivered warnings of storms, or facilitated the movement of critical cargo, whether manuscripts, medicines, or other precious goods. Tales describe black-mantled riders appearing at midnight to assist ships stranded in shallow waters, guiding them to safety before vanishing once more into the dark. In some accounts, the Iberian Passage also carried a spiritual dimension. The knights are said to have engaged with a diversity of traditions, learning from Jewish scholars, Muslim philosophers, and Christian mystics. Their black mantles became symbols of a wider commitment, not merely to survival, but to understanding and the preservation of knowledge across cultural and religious boundaries. They may have gathered alchemical formulas, medical remedies, astronomical charts, and philosophical treatises, storing them in hidden locations or transmitting them along secret networks. Imagine a winter night along the Duero River. Mist rises from the water, curling around stone bridges and the towers of small towns. A small caravan waits silently along a forest path, laden with manuscripts and supplies. From the darkness, black-cloaked riders emerge. They guide the group through a series of hidden passes, across frozen streams and over hills, leaving markers that only trained eyes can interpret. By dawn, the travelers are safely beyond the danger zone. The knights have vanished, leaving only faint hoofprints in the snow and the knowledge that someone watched over them. The Iberian Passage was not without risk. Knights could be captured, betrayed by those who feared their secrecy, or confronted by soldiers loyal to kings who misunderstood their intentions. Yet their caution, combined with careful alliances, allowed the passage to endure. Over decades, it became a lifeline for scholars, merchants, and travelers, a quiet corridor that connected regions, preserved culture, and maintained the ethos of the Black Knights. Stories of their work in Iberia eventually merged with folklore. Villagers spoke of mysterious figures appearing at dusk to help travelers, protect caravans, or deliver vital messages. Children claimed to see black shapes in the mountains guiding wayward animals or lost neighbors home. Mariners along the coast whispered of black-mantled riders who appeared before storms to warn them of danger. These accounts, passed down through generations, maintain the memory of the knights' guardianship even as their formal order faded from history. To imagine the Iberian Passage is to imagine patience, skill, and dedication. The knights moved without recognition, shaping the night itself into a corridor of safety. Their purpose was not conquest, but care, for people, for knowledge, and for the quiet preservation of civilization's fragile treasures. Each journey was a meditation in motion, a demonstration of discipline and courage that required both mind and heart. As you drift towards sleep, picture the misty rivers, the shadowed mountains, and the ancient towns of Iberia. See the black mantles gliding silently across forest paths and hidden passes. Hear the faint whisper of hooves on stone, the rustle of cloaks through underbrush, the quiet guidance offered without expectation of thanks. Feel the continuity of their vigilance, the enduring care that stretches across centuries, quietly shaping the world from behind a veil of shadow. The Iberian Passage, like the Northern Watch and the English Veil before it, reminds us that some of the most profound acts of guardianship are invisible. Protection, preservation, and guidance need not be announced. They need only be carried out with patience, discretion, and unwavering purpose. And in this quiet work, the legend of the Black Knights continues to grow, moving silently through history, from shadow to shadow, across the lands they swore to guard. Among the many whispered legends of the Black Knights, few are as enduring or as mysterious as their connection to holy relics. In an age when faith shaped every corner of daily life, relics were not merely objects of devotion. They were symbols of power, of history, of connection between the earthly and the divine. Churches and monasteries displayed them openly, fragments of saints' bones, pieces of the true cross, or vessels associated with Christ and the apostles. Kings and bishops coveted them, wars were waged over them, and pilgrims journeyed for miles to touch or behold them. Yet, for the Black Knights, the value of relics was often not political or monetary. Their interest was preservation, protection, and sometimes secret study. In the chaotic decades following the fall of the Templar Order, many relics were at risk. Some were hidden to avoid confiscation by kings or popes. Others were seized during conflicts between rival religious factions. The knights, moving unseen across Europe, were said to act as custodians, ensuring that these sacred objects survived the turbulence of the age. Imagine a knight in northern France. A monastery has fallen into disrepair, its doors boarded up, yet inside rests a reliquary said to contain a fragment of the true cross. Under the cover of darkness, riders in black mantles approach silently. With careful hands, they remove the reliquary and transport it to a safe location, a hidden crypt, a merchant's warehouse, or a remote mountain chapel. Every step is deliberate. No noise is made to attract attention. By dawn, the relic is safe, and the knights have disappeared without a trace. The knight's role was not only about physical protection. In some accounts, they were also involved in studying the relic's mysteries. Relics were often believed to contain divine energy or hidden properties. The Black Knights, steeped in the intellectual traditions of the Templars and their alchemical pursuits, may have sought to understand these properties, how objects, inscriptions, or even the arrangement of sacred items could influence healing, guidance, or insight. Legends speak of manuscripts containing instructions for ritual observation, careful measurements of light falling upon relics, and notes on the preservation of these sacred objects. In Italy, some relics traveled through the hidden hands of knights. Churches in Florence and Venice, seeking to secure treasures during the upheavals of the early 14th century, were said to have temporarily entrusted them to black-cloaked guardians. One story tells of a chest containing relics of a saint being hidden in the catacombs beneath a Venetian palazzo, with a single black cross carved on the supporting pillar, a mark known only to those who could read the sign. The guardians ensured that neither theft nor damage occurred, and centuries later, the relics would re-emerge in their intended sanctuaries, intact and revered. The Iberian Peninsula, too, held secrets. As the Reconquista unfolded, sacred objects moved between Christian and Muslim territories, often hidden to prevent desecration or destruction. The knights are said to have guided these objects along safe routes, sometimes coordinating with scholars, merchants, or sympathetic clergy. The preservation of relics became intertwined with the preservation of knowledge. Manuscripts, medical texts, astronomical charts, and religious items were all safeguarded by the same silent, careful hands. In England, relics sometimes traveled under the guise of ordinary objects. A small crucifix might be concealed in a merchant's chest of fabrics. A saint's bone fragment might rest hidden among everyday utensils. The Black Knights, skilled in discretion and observation, could ensure these sacred items remained undisturbed even during inquisitions, wars, or political upheaval. The purpose was always clear: to maintain a connection between the past and the present, between faith and those who revered it, without inviting the dangers of exposure. Beyond protection, the knights may have also facilitated pilgrimages. Pilgrims traveling to sites such as Santiago de Compostela, Canterbury, or Rome were vulnerable to robbery or assault along long, isolated roads. The Black Knights, moving unseen, could guide pilgrims safely, often ensuring that relics reached their destinations unharmed. These journeys were quiet, unheralded, and often never recorded, yet they contributed to the continuity of devotion and faith across generations. Some chroniclers hinted that the knights' work extended to uncovering hidden relics, objects lost or forgotten over centuries. Ancient churches abandoned by war, crypts sealed after scandal, or ruins long ignored might harbor sacred items. The Black Knights, combining skill, observation, and knowledge passed down from the Templars, reportedly located these treasures and placed them in safer hands. In this sense, they were not only guardians but also seekers, ensuring that sacred history was neither lost nor desecrated. Imagine a winter's night in the Apennines. Snow blankets the hills, and the wind whistles through the narrow valleys. In the darkness, figures in black move silently over frozen paths, carrying a small, ornate box. Within lies a fragment of a saint's relic, wrapped carefully in cloth. They navigate the cliffs with care, avoiding patrols and travelers until they reach a hidden chapel. There, the relic is placed beneath the altar, the cross mark etched on the wall a subtle sign for those who might come after. The guardians depart, leaving silence and protection in their wake. It is in these acts, quiet, deliberate, and unseen, that the legend of the Black Knight's care for holy relics endures. They did not seek fame or fortune. They did not publicly declare victories or demand recognition. Their work was patience, vigilance, and respect for what was sacred. In protecting relics, they safeguarded not only objects but faith itself, continuity across generations, and the fragile link between history and memory. The tales of relics moved by black-cloaked riders survive in fragments, marginal notes in manuscripts, letters of the faithful referencing anonymous protectors, and oral histories of villages where sacred items reappeared mysteriously. Though historians often dismiss these stories as myth, their persistence across centuries suggests a truth that is felt rather than proven, a quiet devotion to preservation, secrecy, and guardianship. As you drift toward sleep, imagine the Black Knights moving through dim corridors, snowy valleys, and quiet towns, their cloaks absorbing the shadows. Hear the gentle clink of the reliquaries, the soft footfalls of horses on frozen ground, the faint rustle of parchment and cloth. Feel the patience, discipline, and quiet vigilance that define their work. They are guardians of history, faith, and wisdom, silent, unseen, yet enduring across time. In the hush of night, among the flickering lamp light and the quiet forests, the secrets of the holy relics persist, preserved by the order time forgot. And so the story continues, moving forward into the shadows of history, whispering of devotion, guardianship, and the quiet power of those who protect what the world is not yet ready to see. France, with its rolling hills, dense forests, and ancient towns, was once the heartland of the Templar order. Yet, after the dramatic fall of the Knights in the early 1300s, the land itself seemed to hold echoes of the black-cloaked riders. In the quiet moments of the night, some say, these remnants continued their work, moving in the shadows to safeguard knowledge, protect the vulnerable, and preserve what could not be left to the turmoil of kings and inquisitors. The shadows of France were not an army. They were a presence, stealthy, deliberate, and often unseen. Their movement was guided by a deep understanding of the land, of human nature, and of history. Where the Templars once operated openly, commanding fortresses and influence, these knights adapted to a world that now viewed them with suspicion. Castles were abandoned, commanderies confiscated, yet the mission endured, now under the soft veil of secrecy. In northern France, the knights were said to intervene along trade routes, where bandits and rogue mercenaries threatened merchants and pilgrims alike. A lone traveler might suddenly notice a shadow at the edge of a forest path, the glint of steel barely visible under the cloak of night. The bandits, it was rumored, would retreat without understanding why, leaving the travelers unharmed. In towns, unexplained protection might appear, doors mysteriously reinforced, supplies delivered overnight, or minor conflicts between feuding neighbors quietly resolved. The forests of the Loire and Burgundy, thick with oak and chestnut, became natural allies for these guardians. Mist curled along the riverbanks in the early mornings, and black mantles blended seamlessly into the shadows of ancient trees. Even on moonlit nights, when silver light reflected off frost and cobblestone, the knights remained undetected, moving as if the forests themselves guided them. In these passages, the natural and the human world intertwined, creating a theater for acts of protection and preservation unseen by ordinary eyes. Part of the Shadow's work involved safeguarding knowledge. French monasteries and abbeys contained manuscripts and relics of immense value, Greek and Latin texts, works of mathematics and astronomy, alchemical treatises, and religious relics that could draw the attention of kings or inquisitors. The Black Knights reportedly transported these treasures discreetly, hiding them in secret compartments, delivering them to sympathetic scholars, or moving them across borders to safer regions. Each act was a delicate balance. The survival of knowledge depended on both speed and discretion. One tale tells of a manuscript copied in a small abbey near Toulouse, detailing advanced astronomical observations. The abbey had fallen under suspicion by the church, yet the Black Knights allegedly arranged for the text to be secretly delivered to a monastery in the Pyrenees. There it remained, safe from destruction, until centuries later when scholars uncovered it, finding insights far ahead of their time. These movements illustrate a subtle network, one that spanned regions and connected guardians, scholars, and travelers through the quiet threads of secrecy. In urban centers such as Paris, Lyon, and Rouen, the Shadow's influence was more discreet. Some knights posed as merchants, artisans, or even monks, blending into the bustling streets. They could deliver messages, carry parcels of texts, or warn of threats, all without drawing attention. Certain inns and taverns became nodes in their network, offering shelter for travelers who required protection and serving as waypoints along the invisible pathways connecting abbeys, towns, and cities. The Shadows were also active along France's borders, particularly near contested regions. They moved across the Pyrenees and into Flanders, ensuring that crucial information and people could cross hostile territories safely. Sometimes these crossings involved diplomacy. A minor lord might be persuaded to allow passage for scholars or pilgrims. Other times, careful planning and stealth were required to avoid confrontation. Every journey demanded intelligence, courage, and the patience to navigate obstacles without revealing the knight's presence. The Shadows of France remind us of the endurance of purpose. Stripped of status, wealth, and recognition, these knights continued their mission in obscurity. Their victories were silent, their presence often unacknowledged, yet their influence persisted across towns, forests, and borders. By safeguarding knowledge, protecting travelers, and preserving relics, they shaped the course of European history in ways that left only faint traces but profound effects. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the forests and villages of France at night, the soft rustle of leaves, the faint glint of steel under the moon, the quiet steps of cloaked figures moving along hidden paths. Feel the patience, the vigilance, and the enduring purpose of these guardians who acted without recognition, moving silently through history. The shadows of France are everywhere and nowhere, leaving behind only the subtle assurance that some protection persists even when unseen. In this quiet, the legend of the Black Knights continues to grow, carried in whispers across time, through forests, towns, and abbeys, shaping events without a name, without applause, but with enduring fidelity to their ancient vows. As the Black Knights moved through Western Europe, whispers suggest that their reach extended beyond the familiar landscapes of forests, rivers, and castles. The eastern lands, rich with ancient knowledge, mysterious traditions, and sprawling trade routes, became a region of fascination and subtle influence. From the Mediterranean shores to the Byzantine cities, and as far east as the reaches of the Ottoman and Persian lands, the knights quietly sought understanding, protection, and connections in ways that few ever witnessed. The Eastern secrets, as these endeavors have been called, were not the work of armies or armies' formations. They were subtle, deliberate, and often invisible. The Black Knights traveled as merchants, pilgrims, or scholars, blending seamlessly into markets, mosques, and monasteries. Their purpose was twofold: to preserve knowledge and relics, and to create networks of guidance for travelers, scholars, and emissaries. Every interaction was measured, every movement deliberate, as if the lands themselves had become a chessboard and each step a calculated strategy. Imagine a night in Constantinople, the city of domes and minarets, where trade from across Asia, Africa, and Europe converged. Lanterns flicker along stone streets, the Bosphorus reflects silver light, and the murmur of the marketplace fades to a whisper. Amid the shadows, figures in black mantles move quietly, delivering messages, acquiring manuscripts, or guiding travelers through hidden passages. No one notices their presence, yet their influence is felt. Manuscripts safely delivered, travelers guided past danger, and secrets preserved for centuries. One legend speaks of a Templar manuscript containing detailed astronomical observations from the East, smuggled from Antioch to a secluded monastery in France. The knights orchestrated the journey across treacherous terrain, navigating deserts, mountains, and political boundaries. Along the way, they engaged with scholars in Damascus, Baghdad, and Cairo, exchanging knowledge in philosophy, medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. Each interaction was discreet, every movement invisible to authorities who might have sought to seize or destroy these texts. The Eastern secrets also involved sacred relics. Crusader relics, manuscripts, and treasures taken from the East were often vulnerable to seizure or loss. The Black Knights, moving silently across borders and deserts, ensured that these items reached safe locations. A piece of a relic could be carried through hidden caravan routes, temporarily hidden in a merchant's warehouse, or concealed in the folds of a traveler's garments. These journeys were guided by intelligence, patience, and deep understanding of both geography and human nature. In lands ruled by multiple faiths and languages, the knights demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They interacted with Jewish scholars in Baghdad, Muslim physicians in Cairo, and Christian monks in Antioch. By cultivating trust and demonstrating respect for local customs, the Black Knights maintained networks that spanned continents. Their work was not conquest, but guardianship, the protection of knowledge, the safe passage of travelers, and the preservation of relics and wisdom at risk of being lost to war, greed, or neglect. Trade routes such as the Silk Road and caravan paths through Anatolia and Persia became arteries for these subtle interventions. The knights could advise merchants, protect pilgrims, and ensure that important manuscripts reached safe destinations. Sometimes they orchestrated meetings between scholars of differing faiths, fostering dialogue and exchange that would influence thought across Europe and the East for generations to come. Even in the deserts of Syria and the mountains of Armenia, the knights moved with patience and precision. A caravan might be guided past dangerous passes, supplies delivered silently to isolated communities, or valuable texts safeguarded from those who would destroy them. In every case, the goal was preservation of lives, of culture, and of knowledge. Their influence was subtle, often invisible, yet profound in its long-term effects. Some chronicles suggest that the Eastern secrets also encompassed alchemical and medicinal knowledge. The knights, inheritors of the Templars' interest in science and healing, gathered rare herbs, medical formulas, and alchemical texts from monasteries, scholars, and trading posts. These items were studied, copied, or transported westward, forming a bridge of knowledge between East and West. Some of these discoveries may have influenced later European medicine, chemistry, and philosophy, though the Black Knight's contribution remained unacknowledged and largely hidden. Picture a night in the Levant, where desert winds sweep through olive groves and ruined fortresses. Black-cloaked riders navigate hidden paths, their movements silent as they transport scrolls and relics. A scholar waiting in a cave receives the precious manuscripts, candles flickering in the darkness. The knights remain just beyond view, observing the exchange before melting back into shadow. By morning, the caravan has departed, and only the faint marks of careful passage remain behind. The Eastern secrets also included the transmission of spiritual practices. The Black Knights engaged with contemplative traditions, observing rituals, prayers, and philosophical practices that broadened their understanding of the human spirit. These insights were integrated into their work of guardianship and preservation, influencing how they guided travelers, safeguarded relics, and maintained networks of secrecy. Their approach combined faith, intelligence, and strategy, creating a legacy that blended the mystical and the practical. As centuries passed, the Eastern secrets faded from direct memory, leaving only traces in manuscripts, marginalia, and oral tradition. Scholars might notice the movement of texts across borders, the sudden appearance of rare manuscripts in European libraries, or the subtle influence of Eastern knowledge in Western philosophy. All of these hints point to the quiet work of the Black Knights, who moved through Eastern lands like shadows, connecting worlds and preserving what was most precious. As you drift into sleep, imagine the vast landscapes of the East, deserts stretching to the horizon, bustling bazaars, and quiet monasteries tucked away in mountain valleys. Picture the black mantles moving silently across continents, guiding travelers, protecting relics, and safeguarding knowledge. Feel the patience, vigilance, and dedication required to operate unseen in these distant lands. The Eastern secrets remind us that influence does not always announce itself. Some of the most profound acts occur quietly, across borders and cultures, preserving what might otherwise be lost. And in this quiet, the legend of the Black Knights continues, moving silently through history, from shadow to shadow, across the lands of East and West, carrying wisdom, protection, and care through the night. Far to the north, where rugged highlands rise from misty lochs and windswept glens, Scotland presents a landscape both harsh and breathtaking. It was here, in these remote reaches, that the Black Knights continued their quiet guardianship, creating what later storytellers would call the Scottish Watch. Amid castles perched on cliffs, forests thick with pine and oak, and villages scattered along narrow glens, the knights moved silently, safeguarding travelers, knowledge, and relics in a land defined by both beauty and danger. The Scottish Watch, like the Northern Watch and the English Vale, was defined by discretion. The knights moved without banners, without heralds, and often without recognition. Their purpose was protection, guidance, and preservation. The Highlands, with their treacherous mountain passes, Mist-laden forests and unpredictable weather offered both shelter and challenge. Every journey required intimate knowledge of the terrain, careful planning, and patience. Snow could fall suddenly, rivers could swell without warning, and hostile clans sometimes made passage perilous. The knights learned to navigate these dangers with both skill and quiet courage. Travelers along the Highland roads, merchants carrying wool, pilgrims journeying to sacred sites, or envoys moving between clans, sometimes spoke of figures appearing from the mist. Clad in black, the knights would guide travelers across difficult terrain, signal safe paths through forests, or defend caravans from brigands. Yet their interventions were subtle. Often the only sign of their presence was a stone carefully placed to mark a hidden route, a faint signal on a tree, or a lantern hung in a particular pattern to indicate shelter. The Scottish Watch also worked to protect knowledge. Monastic libraries, abbeys, and castle collections contained manuscripts, religious relics, and accounts of ancient traditions. In a region shaped by frequent clan conflicts and political upheavals, these treasures were vulnerable. The Black Knights reportedly moved them to safer locations, copied texts, and coordinated with local scholars to ensure continuity. In some cases, rare manuscripts were hidden in caves or remote monasteries, emerging centuries later intact, their survival credited to the careful planning and quiet vigilance of these unseen guardians. The rugged landscape itself became an ally. Narrow glens and high mountain passes provided natural concealment, while frozen lochs and snow-covered hills absorbed sound, allowing the knights to move unseen. They learned to interpret the subtle signs of the land, animal tracks, the direction of the wind, and the patterns of mist and fog. These skills allowed them to guide travelers safely, evade threats, and maintain their network of hidden routes across the Highlands. Clans and local leaders sometimes collaborated with the knights, often without fully understanding their presence. A small sign, an arrangement of stones, a carved cross, or a particular knot in a rope, could indicate a safe house or signal that assistance was available. By fostering these silent alliances, the Black Knights created a network that spanned glens, lochs, and mountains, offering protection to those who understood the subtle codes. Maritime routes along the Scottish coast also fell under the Watch's care. Fishing villages, trade ships, and pilgrim boats often faced dangers from storms, reefs, or hostile vessels. Black-cloaked riders would sometimes guide small ships along treacherous passages or deliver warnings to coastal communities. Stories speak of mysterious lights along cliffs, guiding ships safely through fog, and of shadowy figures moving silently along beaches at night to ensure safe passage. These acts, subtle but impactful, contributed to the safety and prosperity of coastal settlements. The spiritual dimension remained central to their work. Many of the knights were deeply devoted, combining martial skill with contemplative practice. In quiet chapels, forest clearings, or abandoned monasteries, they observed rituals, offered prayers, and sought guidance. Their devotion informed their actions, allowing them to balance vigilance with compassion, courage with restraint. Each journey, each intervention, was a reflection of their commitment to protect life, preserve knowledge, and maintain sacred traditions. The Scottish Watch also maintained connections with other regions. Networks from England, France, and even Iberia and the East intersected in subtle ways. Messages, manuscripts, and travelers could move across Europe along these hidden pathways, guided by black-cloaked figures who understood both the geography and the human challenges of each region. The knights' influence, though unseen, shaped outcomes and preserved continuity across a fragmented and often dangerous landscape. Legends of the Scottish Watch persist in local folklore. Villagers spoke of black-cloaked riders appearing in misty glens to guide travelers, protect children, or deliver medicine. Ancient markers, carved in stone or wood, indicated hidden paths or safe houses. Fishermen, farmers, and travelers remembered glimpses of shadowy figures whose presence brought reassurance. Over time, these stories merged with myth and legend, creating a sense of enduring guardianship that stretched across centuries. Picture a winter evening in the Highlands. Snow falls softly over the glens, and lochs reflect the pale light of a crescent moon. Figures in black move silently along hidden paths, guiding a caravan of pilgrims through treacherous terrain. The wind carries no sound of their passage, the snow absorbs every footfall, and by dawn, the travelers have reached safety. The nights have vanished into the mist, leaving only the faintest trace and the certainty that they were there. The Scottish Watch, like other regional operations of the Black Knights, demonstrates the enduring power of vigilance, discretion, and purpose. Their victories were silent, their influence subtle, yet their impact was profound. By guiding travelers, preserving knowledge, protecting relics, and maintaining hidden networks, they ensured that civilization, culture, and faith survived the turbulence of time. As you drift into sleep, imagine the misty glens, snow-covered hills, and quiet lochs of Scotland. See the black mantles gliding silently along hidden paths, hear the faint rustle of cloaks through forest underbrush, and feel the patience and vigilance of these guardians. Their work was unseen, their victories uncelebrated, yet their presence endures in the shadows of history, quietly shaping the world and preserving what is precious. The Scottish Watch reminds us that some of the most profound acts are carried out in silence. Influence need not be declared. Protection, preservation, and guidance can be invisible, felt only in the safety and continuity that survive long after the actors themselves have disappeared. In the hush of night, amid the beauty and danger of the Highlands, the legend of the Black Knights continues, moving from shadow to shadow, across land and time. Across Europe, the Black Knights were not only guardians of travelers, relics, and secret paths, they were also silent protectors of knowledge. In a time when books were rare, manuscripts were treasures, and education was confined to the privileged, the preservation of information became a sacred duty. The hidden halls of knowledge were repositories of wisdom, tucked away in abbeys, monasteries, and even the basements of private estates. These halls were never marked on maps, yet they carried the collective intellect of generations, guarded by black-cloaked knights who understood both its fragility and its power. Many of these halls began as monastic libraries, where monks copied texts by candlelight, painstakingly preserving works of philosophy, medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. Yet monasteries could be vulnerable, war, plunder, or political intrigue often threatened the survival of their collections. The Black Knights, following the ideals passed down from the Templar order, intervened to safeguard these treasures. They moved texts to hidden locations, copied manuscripts for preservation, and sometimes transported collections across borders to ensure survival. In northern Italy, for example, a small monastery held rare Greek manuscripts, their margins filled with notes from scholars who had fled Constantinople. During a period of political instability, black-cloaked writers arrived under the cover of night. They cataloged the texts, transported key works to secure locations in the countryside, and left cryptic markings in the monastery for future custodians. By dawn, the knights had disappeared, leaving only the faint impression of order restored and knowledge preserved. The hidden halls of knowledge were not limited to manuscripts alone. Maps, astronomical charts, alchemical formulas, and early medical treatises were also safeguarded. Some of these items might have seemed ordinary to an untrained eye, a scroll rolled tightly, a small chest of herbs, or a carefully bound codex, but to the knights, each object was a piece of the intellectual mosaic of Europe and the broader world. Their work ensured that discoveries, ideas, and wisdom survived even when the political and religious storms of the time threatened to erase them. In France and England, some halls were located beneath abbeys or in forgotten castles. A secret stairway, concealed behind a wall panel, might lead to a chamber where manuscripts were stacked along stone shelves, protected from damp and light. Knights monitored access, ensuring that only trusted scholars or clerics could enter. Messages carved in code or discrete symbols helped guide those who sought knowledge without alerting outsiders to its presence. Each movement, each act of preservation, was deliberate, combining strategy, foresight, and reverence. Trade routes also played a crucial role. Scholars, merchants, and travelers often carried texts across Europe. The knights acted as invisible guides, ensuring that these precious items reached their destinations safely. Along the Rhine, the Danube, and the roads of the Iberian Peninsula, black mantles moved silently, protecting the movement of knowledge as vigilantly as they guarded pilgrims or relics. Their work was never publicized. Success meant that no one noticed their intervention, only that manuscripts arrived intact and lives were spared. Some halls were hidden within the natural landscape itself. In the Alps, a cave system might house manuscripts and relics, protected from raiders and the elements. In Scotland, forests concealed chambers where texts and maps were stored in wooden cases, secured against dampness and fire. In Iberia, monasteries tucked into mountains held codices brought from distant lands, safeguarded by black-cloaked guardians who understood that knowledge was as precious as any treasure. The Black Knights also worked with scholars, forming secret networks of trusted custodians. A mathematician in Paris might correspond with a monk in Toledo, exchanging ideas and receiving texts via intermediaries under the knight's protection. A physician in Venice could gain access to rare herbal guides preserved in the hidden halls, allowing knowledge to be shared across Europe despite political and religious obstacles. These interactions created an invisible web of intellectual continuity, spanning centuries and continents, whose influence is still traceable in the progression of science, philosophy, and art. Even in the shadows, ritual and devotion accompanied their work. Knights often recited prayers for wisdom and protection while safeguarding manuscripts or guiding scholars. They understood that knowledge was not merely practical, it was sacred, carrying the ideas, beliefs, and insights of those who came before. Protecting it was an act of reverence, a continuation of a mission rooted in faith and discipline. Imagine a night in the Pyrenees. The moon casts silver light over snow-covered peaks, and a group of knights moves silently along hidden paths. In a secluded monastery, a scholar awaits, eyes wide with anticipation as black mantles deliver a bundle of manuscripts, wrapped in cloth and carefully bound. The knights arrange the texts along stone shelves, leave coded signs for future access, and vanish into the mist before the first light of dawn. The scholar opens the manuscripts, unaware of the full extent of the guardianship that brought them here. The hidden halls of knowledge, like the Northern Watch, the English Vale, and the Iberian Passage, exemplify the quiet power of the Black Knights. Their victories were not celebrated in banners or battle cries. Their influence was subtle, invisible, and enduring. By preserving knowledge, they maintained a bridge between past and future, ensuring that ideas, discoveries, and wisdom could survive the turbulence of human history. As you drift deeper into sleep, picture these hidden halls, stone walls lined with manuscripts, flickering candlelight, the faint rustle of pages, and the soft tread of black-cloaked knights moving silently among the shelves. Feel the patience, vigilance, and devotion that allowed knowledge to endure across centuries, preserved in secrecy and reverence. The hidden halls of knowledge remind us that some of the most enduring legacies are those carried quietly through time. Protection, preservation, and the careful passage of wisdom do not require recognition. They require only diligence, patience, and fidelity to purpose. And in the quiet of these halls, the Black Knights continue their work, invisible yet profound, shaping the course of history one silent step at a time. Italy, with its sunlit hills, narrow cobblestone streets, and grand cathedrals, was a land of extraordinary beauty and hidden intrigue. In the wake of the Templar Order's dissolution, whispers speak of black-cloaked figures moving through its cities and countryside, the Italian shadows. Unlike the open knights of legend, these guardians operated in secrecy, navigating political intrigue, artistic flourish, and the delicate balance of power among city-states, religious authorities, and merchant dynasties. Florence, Venice, and Rome were hubs of commerce, culture, and influence. Here, wealth and knowledge intertwined, attracting scholars, artists, and adventurers. But the cities were also rife with danger. Political rivalries, mercenary bands, and church scrutiny made the preservation of relics, manuscripts, and travelers a delicate task. The Italian shadows emerged as invisible custodians, their movement silent, their impact profound yet unnoticed. Imagine a narrow Venetian canal at twilight. Lanterns flicker against the water, gondolas glide silently along the reflections of palace walls, and the city hums with commerce. Among the shadows, a figure in a black mantle moves swiftly along the alleys, carrying a small chest of manuscripts. The knight navigates unseen bridges, avoids the gaze of patrolling guards, and delivers the precious texts to a secluded monastery. By dawn, the manuscripts are safely stored, and the knight has vanished, leaving only the quiet assurance that knowledge survives. The Italian shadows also operated in rural regions, where small monasteries and villas held treasures often overlooked by city authorities. Here, the knight's tasks were multifaceted. They protected relics at risk of theft, safeguarded manuscripts from decay, and guided travelers through forests, hills, and mountain passes. In some cases, they acted as intermediaries, facilitating the discreet exchange of texts, art, or rare medicines between patrons, scholars, and religious institutions. In Florence, the heart of the Renaissance, the shadows worked behind the scenes to preserve the continuity of intellectual growth. They ensured that manuscripts, early scientific works, and philosophical treatises survived the political and religious turbulence of the time. A scholar might awaken to find a rare text carefully placed in their study, delivered silently by knights who had moved through the night unseen. Their interventions were deliberate, always discreet, and never seeking acknowledgement. The shadows' influence extended to the protection of relics in some of Italy's most sacred spaces. Rome, with its basilicas, crypts, and catacombs, contained treasures that drew the attention of rulers and clergy alike. Knights moved under the veil of darkness, transporting relics to hidden chapels, secret vaults, or remote monasteries. Each step was measured. The slightest miscalculation could bring disaster. Their vigilance ensured that sacred objects endured through political upheaval, war, and the passage of time. Maritime routes along the Italian coastline were also part of their domain. From Genoa to Naples, ships carrying trade goods, texts, or pilgrims faced dangers from pirates, storms, or rival factions. The Italian shadows sometimes guided these vessels from hidden vantage points, signaling safe passages or offering clandestine assistance. Fishermen and sailors would whisper of black figures along the cliffs or small lanterns appearing at night to indicate safe harbor, yet no one could claim to know the full extent of their guidance. Art and culture, too, were indirectly touched by these guardians. The shadows understood the value of preservation in all forms: manuscripts, paintings, and sacred objects. They maintained networks that ensured fragile works of art survived, sometimes moving them from vulnerable locations to secure hiding places. In doing so, they became invisible patrons of culture, safeguarding the legacy of the Renaissance before it could flourish fully in public view. The Italian shadows also coordinated with other regions. Connections with France, Iberia, and the eastern lands allowed manuscripts, relics, and travelers to move across borders safely. Messages were delivered discreetly, often encoded, with trusted intermediaries ensuring that each item reached its destination intact. These networks were silent but resilient, enabling the flow of knowledge and protection across the continent without the need for armies or public recognition. Even in the face of danger, the Shadows remained disciplined. They avoided unnecessary confrontation, using intelligence and discretion to protect what they were sworn to guard. Their greatest victories were silent: a manuscript preserved from decay, a relic safeguarded from theft, a traveler guided through peril. In every action, patience and subtlety were paramount. They understood that their work's value lay not in fame but in the quiet endurance of history, faith, and culture. Picture a night in the Tuscan hills. The moon casts silver light across vineyards and olive groves. A group of knights in black mantles moves silently along narrow paths, carrying manuscripts and sacred relics. They navigate hidden entrances to villas and monasteries, leaving coded signs for future guardians. By the time the first birds announce the dawn, the knights have disappeared into the hills, their presence known only to the items they have protected and the scholars who will benefit from them. The Italian Shadows, like the Northern Watch, the English Veil, the Iberian Passage, the Eastern Secrets, and the Scottish Watch, exemplify the quiet, enduring power of the Black Knights. They acted without recognition, celebrated victories, or public acclaim. Their work was patience, vigilance, and devotion, preserving life, knowledge, and culture across generations. As you drift deeper into sleep, picture the canals, hills, and hidden corridors of Italy. See the black mantles moving silently, carrying manuscripts, relics, and wisdom through the night. Hear only the soft rustle of cloaks and the faint clink of metal, feel the patience and vigilance of these guardians, and sense the quiet power of their enduring presence. The Italian Shadows remind us that influence and protection need not announce themselves. Some of the most profound acts are invisible, their impact felt only in the survival of knowledge, culture, and faith. And in this quiet vigilance, the legend of the Black Knights continues, moving silently through history, from shadow to shadow, across lands and centuries, preserving what the world is not yet ready to see. The Black Knights, shrouded in mystery and cloaked in shadow, leave behind a legacy that stretches far beyond the castles, forests, and mountains they once traversed. From the northern highlands to the sunlit hills of Italy, from the Iberian passages to the eastern lands, their work was never public, yet it shaped the course of history in subtle, enduring ways. Their story is one of vigilance, patience, and devotion, a quiet influence that protected lives, knowledge, and sacred traditions across centuries. Though their order was fragmented after the fall of the Templars, the Knights carried forward the principles of guardianship, secrecy, and careful stewardship. They understood that true power lies not in conquest or recognition, but in the preservation of what is most valuable. This included people fleeing danger, manuscripts containing knowledge, relics infused with faith, and the fragile continuity of culture itself. Every hidden path, every secret library, and every unseen intervention contributed to a broader tapestry of protection woven silently through the night. In their northern watch, black mantles moved through snowy forests and along frozen rivers, guiding travelers and safeguarding settlements. In the English Vale, their presence offered quiet protection for scholars, merchants, and pilgrims along treacherous roads. Across Iberia, they navigated mountain passes and river valleys, carrying manuscripts and relics while preserving the safety of those who relied on their guidance. In the East, they built networks that connected scholars, traders, and pilgrims across continents, facilitating the exchange of knowledge and culture while avoiding danger. In Scotland, the Highlands became corridors of safety, their paths known only to those who understood the subtle signs of protection. In Italy, they moved through city streets, rural hills, and coastal waterways, preserving relics, manuscripts, and the continuity of intellectual growth in the Renaissance. The hidden halls of knowledge were perhaps their greatest achievement, though largely unrecognized. Manuscripts, alchemical formulas, medical texts, and philosophical treatises survived because of the knights' care. Their work ensured that centuries of learning did not vanish amidst wars, plunder, and political upheaval. Scholars could continue their studies, ideas could flow between regions, and future generations would inherit knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. In every hidden hall, every secret library, and every clandestine exchange, the Black Knights maintained a bridge between past and future, history and memory. Relics, too, remained under their watchful protection. Sacred objects, once vulnerable to theft, destruction, or misuse, were carefully concealed, transported, and preserved. The knights understood that these items carried more than historical value. They were symbols of faith, hope, and continuity. By safeguarding them, the Black Knights maintained a spiritual and cultural connection that stretched across time, ensuring that these treasures survived not only for those of their own era but for generations to come. Beyond their physical actions, the Black Knights were guardians of wisdom and discipline. Their work required patience, observation, and adaptability. They learned to read the land, interpret human behavior, and navigate the unpredictable currents of politics and conflict. Each movement, each intervention, was calculated, ensuring that their mission remained undetected yet effective. The quiet power of their influence lies not in what is visible, but in the outcomes that endure long after their presence has faded from memory. Spiritual devotion remained central to their purpose. While they moved through forests, cities, and mountain paths, they also paused in quiet contemplation. In secluded chapels, abandoned monasteries, and forest clearings, they offered prayers for protection, guidance, and wisdom. Their faith shaped not only their actions but also the ethos of the order, a commitment to safeguarding life, knowledge, and culture regardless of recognition or reward. Each journey was both a physical endeavor and a spiritual exercise, blending vigilance with devotion, strategy with conscience. The Black Knight's legacy is not written in grand monuments or chronicles of battles won. It is found in the survival of ideas, the preservation of sacred objects, the protection of vulnerable lives, and the quiet continuity of cultural and intellectual traditions. Their victories were subtle, often invisible, yet their impact resonates through history. Scholars, historians, and those who study relics or manuscripts may glimpse traces of their presence, hints of an invisible network that moved across borders, lands, and centuries with unwavering purpose. Imagine a knight in any of these regions. A forest glade in the north, a mountain pass in Iberia, a monastery in Italy, or a bazaar in the east. Black mantles glide silently through the shadows, guiding travelers, carrying manuscripts, and safeguarding relics. A lantern flickers briefly, a symbol etched in stone, a book is carefully placed on a shelf, and then the knights disappear into the darkness. By dawn, the world appears unchanged, yet safety, knowledge, and continuity have been preserved. Their presence is felt in the calm, in the survival of wisdom, and in the enduring connection between past and future. In reflecting upon the legacy of the Black Knights, one sees a story of dedication without recognition, courage without applause, and vigilance without reward. They demonstrate that some of the most profound acts of influence are quiet, subtle, and unseen. Protection and preservation are often most powerful when they occur in silence, without fanfare or notice, shaping the course of history in ways that cannot be measured by conventional standards. As you drift into sleep, Picture the Black Knights moving through the lands, forests, rivers, and mountains they once traversed. Feel the patience, courage, and devotion that define their mission. Hear only the soft rustle of cloaks, the gentle clink of metal, and the faint whisper of pages turning in hidden libraries. Sense the invisible threads of guidance and protection that stretch across time, connecting the past with the present and the future. The legacy of the Black Knights is timeless. It is a story of guardianship, secrecy, and quiet devotion. It reminds us that some of the most enduring impacts are invisible, their presence felt not in monuments or records but in the survival of knowledge, culture, and life itself. And in the hush of night, across forests, hills, cities, and seas, their influence continues, moving silently from shadow to shadow, preserving what the world is not yet ready to see. Even as centuries pass, the Black Knights endure, in legend, in whispers, and in the subtle continuities of history, reminding us that true guardianship requires patience, discipline, and unwavering commitment. Their story concludes in silence, yet it echoes across time, a quiet testament to the power of vigilance, care, and enduring purpose. As our journey with the Black Knights comes to a close, allow yourself to feel the calm of history gently settling around you. Imagine the black-cloaked guardians fading into the shadows, their work complete, yet their presence lingering softly in the echoes of forests, mountains, and ancient halls. The relics remain protected, the manuscripts preserved, and the wisdom of centuries quietly continues to flow through time. Breathe slowly, letting the stories drift through your mind like a gentle river. Feel the patience, the vigilance, and the devotion of these silent protectors surrounding you, a shield of history, mystery, and quiet strength. Every shadow, every hidden path, every guarded secret exists to remind us of the care, courage, and dedication that endures even when unseen. As you settle deeper into sleep, let the whispers of the past soothe your thoughts. Let the calm rhythm of history carry you into rest, knowing that the world is vast, full of hidden guardians, and that some stories, though quietly told, can bring comfort, wonder, and peace. If you enjoyed traveling through history tonight, gently like this video and subscribe for more journeys into forgotten mysteries and whispered legends. Let the night cradle you as you drift, and let the stories linger softly in your dreams. Good night.